The quiet hum of the restaurant died as Sarah Olson, my fiancée, snatched the engagement ring from her finger. She dropped it into my half-eaten bowl of clam chowder, a splash of cream hitting my cheek. "You're not enough, David," she said, her voice clear for the whole dining room. "I deserve more than Bellevue." It had been 3 years since I first saw Sarah Olson across the riverfront ballroom, a space usually reserved for sterile corporate announcements, now awash in the dull glow of a company mixer. I was 32, working in regulatory affairs at Riverside Pharmaceuticals. A decent guy, I thought, a reliable one. Sarah, with her sharp angles and a smile that seemed to understand more than it let on, immediately caught my eye. She was standing alone, nursing a sparkling water, looking slightly out of place amidst the forced cheer of the sales team. "Rescue mission," I said, stepping closer, holding out a glass of Cabernet. "You look like you needed saving from corporate small talk." My voice was steady, a little more confident than I felt. She laughed, a low, warm sound that softened the lines around her eyes. Her wit was quick, a perfect foil to my quiet humor. We spent the rest of the evening by the potted palms, sharing easy laughs, trading stories about office politics and the absurdities of quarterly reports. She worked in marketing, a department I rarely intersected with. It felt like finding a new country right within the familiar borders of my company. Our first date was at Altrove, a small Italian place downtown with checkered tablecloths and red wine stains on the menus. Sarah wore a dress the color of rich Merlot, and the dim light made her eyes seem even deeper. We talked about hiking trails we wanted to conquer, books we'd read, and the surprising common ground of our mutual hatred for cilantro. It was easy, like we'd known each other longer than the few hours we'd spent at the mixer. By the third date, watching her explain the finer points of competitive gardening to a bewildered waiter, I knew I was falling. She was vibrant, fearless, full of an energy that felt new and invigorating. 6 months later, at a charity gala hosted by one of Riverside's major donors, I saw a different side of Sarah. A warning sign, perhaps, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. She wasn't the woman who laughed easily at my jokes or shared quiet observations about mundane things. Tonight, she was a professional, a calculating networker. Her smile was still beautiful, but it felt less like an invitation and more like a tool. She moved through the room with a focused precision, her hands shaking one important person's, her eyes already scanning for the next. I found myself standing by the bar, observing her, a silent observer in her grand strategy. A group of executives, their faces flushed with expensive whiskey, cornered her. I watched her charming them, her voice a little higher, a little more polished. That was when I heard it, a snippet of conversation carried over the clinking of glasses. "This job is just a stepping stone, of course," she'd said, her tone light, dismissive. "I'm aiming for New York, maybe Paris. Bigger things." She gestured vaguely with her champagne flute, encompassing a world far beyond Bellevue. Later, in the quiet of my apartment, I brought it up. "What did you mean, a stepping stone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. She was untying the ribbons of her dress, her back to me. She turned, a slight frown on her face. "David, that's just how you talk to those people. It's networking. You have to sell yourself." She gave a little sigh. "Don't be so naive." I let it go, attributing my discomfort to my own lack of understanding, my small-town sensibilities bumping up against her sophisticated ambition. Maybe I was naive. A year into our relationship, Sarah moved in. My comfortable bachelor pad, furnished with mismatched hand-me-downs and a single, well-worn armchair, slowly began its transformation. First came the scented candles, then the art prints, and finally a concerning number of throw pillows that seemed to multiply on the couch and the bed. It wasn't my place anymore, not exactly, but it felt like ours. We settled into comfortable routines. Sunday morning pancakes with blueberries, Thursday night movies picked from her extensive mental list, trips to the farmer's market where she haggled expertly for artisanal cheese. Life became a pattern, predictable and mostly good. The first crack in the otherwise smooth surface of our life together appeared after Sarah's sister, Brenda's wedding. It was a lavish affair held at some country club out past the city limits, all white roses and crystal flutes. Brenda had married Kyle, a man whose family money smelled faintly of old industry and new investments. During the reception, while the band played a generic pop song, Aunt Carol, 3 gin and tonics deep, leaned across our table. Her eyes, usually kind, were a little too bright. "So when are you two next?" she asked, her voice carrying a little too far. I felt the question land like a stone, heavy and unexpected. Later, as the DJ announced the bouquet toss, Sarah was already moving, positioning herself front and center among the giggling bridesmaids and hopeful single women. Brenda tossed it with an arching grace, and Sarah, with an almost predatory focus, reached out, catching it cleanly. She turned, a triumphant grin on her face, the bouquet held high. Her eyes, as she looked at me across the crowded room, were challenging. "Look what I got," she mouthed, the words lost in the music but clear in their intent. I took a large gulp of champagne, the bubbles sharp against my throat. After that night, the comfortable someday conversations we used to have about marriage shifted. They became pointed questions, asked with an undertone of expectation. "When are we going to take the next step?" Sarah asked one Tuesday night, as I was brushing my teeth. I nearly choked on the toothpaste, a minty foam filling my mouth. I rinsed, then turned to her, leaning against the doorframe of the bathroom. "I want to wait for the associate director promotion," I explained, my voice a little muffled. "For the financial stability, it makes sense, you know." She seemed to understand. She walked over, pressed a kiss to my cheek. "Okay," she said, her voice soft. "I can be patient." For a moment, I believed it. The bathroom light hummed, casting long shadows. Then I added, perhaps unwisely, "It's not like Kyle and Brenda, with all that family money to help with their down payment." Sarah's expression flickered, a subtle shift in her eyes, like a cloud passing over the sun. The softness in her voice was gone. "What does that have to do with anything?" she asked, her tone cool, flat. The air in the small bathroom seemed to thicken. I tried to explain, stumbling over my words, about wanting to earn it ourselves, about wanting to provide. But she just watched me, her gaze unblinking. We went to bed without resolving it that night. It wouldn't be the last time. At work, the promised promotion to associate director, a carrot Gary, my boss, had been dangling for months, kept getting pushed back. "Next quarter, David," he'd say, tapping his pen on the desk. "We just need to clear some budget hurdles first." Or, "Great work on the regulatory filings, truly. We're almost there, just a little more visibility on that new project." Each delay was a small pinprick, a constant reminder of the unfinished business that hung over my head, and now over our relationship. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, offered her own counsel over dinner one evening, slicing into her steak with deliberate precision. "You need to be more aggressive, David," she said, not looking up. "No one gets ahead by waiting patiently in line. You have to take it." She looked up then, her eyes direct, unyielding. "You're good at what you do, but good isn't enough when everyone else is pushing for more." Her words tasted like metal, efficient and cold. A few weeks later, Gary called me into his office. The blinds were drawn, the room dim. He looked tired, his face a little gray around the edges. He announced he was taking unexpected medical leave due to heart issues. 3 to 6 months at least, he said, his voice quiet. He then offered me the interim department head position. "It's an opportunity, David," he said, trying for a cheerful tone. "A chance to prove yourself." I nodded, a knot forming in my stomach. I was grateful, of course, for the chance, for the trust. But it wasn't the full promotion, not the one I'd been waiting for, the one Sarah was expecting. It was a temporary placeholder. Sarah was less impressed. I told her the news over takeout Thai, recounting Gary's somber tone, the weight of the responsibility. She picked out a spring roll. "It's not the promotion we discussed, is it?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of celebration. Her eyes, usually so expressive, seemed to hold a distant calculation. I felt a familiar frustration prickle at me. I was stepping up, taking on more, but it wasn't enough. The interim role plunged me into a new set of responsibilities, including managing key client relationships. That's how I met Marcus Dubois. He was from Translogix, a major international logistics firm we were trying to secure a long-term contract with. Marcus was charismatic, smooth, and effortlessly worldly. He spoke with a soft French accent that seemed to make every word sound more sophisticated. I introduced him to Sarah at a company dinner we hosted, a necessary formality to impress a potential client. From the moment he leaned in to kiss her hand, A flicker of something new passed between them. Sarah, usually composed, seemed almost breathless. I watched her, feeling a subtle chill. Soon after, Sarah announced she was taking French lessons. For work, she said, shrugging, though her eyes sparkled with an almost childlike enthusiasm I hadn't seen in a while. Translogics is a big account. It'll be good to understand the culture better. I nodded, trying to convince myself. But her excitement felt too personal, too eager for something purely professional. She'd spend evenings hunched over textbooks, repeating phrases in a new, unfamiliar voice. The sound of it, the foreign syllables, only amplified the growing sense of unease within me. I started to feel increasingly insecure. It was a subtle thing at first, a creeping shadow, a quiet tension in the spaces between us. Her phone was always in her hand, often turned away from me. Her schedule became more opaque, filled with work events and lessons. I found myself looking for signs, for confirmation of the fear that was beginning to take root. One Saturday afternoon, I ran into her at the department store. She was looking at designer handbags with a friend, laughing. I kept my distance, hidden by a rack of expensive suits, planning to surprise her. Then I heard her voice, clear and sharp. "I deserve more than this small-town life," she said, her tone dismissive, a little weary. "I'm meant for more than Bellevue, Brenda. I need wealth, status, not just comfortable." She paused, then added, "It's just so stagnant here." She didn't mention me, but the context was clear. My heart sank, a slow, cold descent. I tried to connect with her after that, to bridge the growing chasm. "You've been distant lately," I finally said one evening, after she'd spent an hour on her phone booping away. She looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "Just stressed with work," she replied, not quite meeting my gaze, her fingers already reaching for her phone again. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with unspoken words in the clatter of our separate lives. After months of interim status, of proving myself in Gary's absence, I finally got the call. The full promotion, associate director. My name on the door, a permanent fixture. The only caveat, delivered with a somber tone by HR, was that Gary wouldn't be returning. His heart condition was more serious than anticipated. I felt a mix of triumph and melancholy, the achievement bittersweet, a new beginning that also marked a quiet end. The office felt emptier without Gary's steady presence, but with the promotion I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was it, I thought. This was the stability Sarah wanted, the next step. This would make her happy. I decided it was time to propose properly, to secure our future. I spent a Saturday afternoon at a small jewelry store downtown, picking out a ring. A modest diamond, classic setting. I envisioned a quiet, intimate moment, maybe at our favorite park bench by the river, a place where we'd shared so many Sunday afternoons. Then Sarah had another idea. "Marcus wants us to have dinner with his family," she announced, her eyes bright, a week before my planned proposal. "It's a huge opportunity for you, David. Their connections are incredible. Think of the networking." She pressed, her enthusiasm infectious, or at least convincing. Despite the growing unease, the subtle chill I felt whenever Marcus was around, I agreed. I wanted to show her I was committed, not just to her, but to the life she envisioned for us. This, I told myself, was part of that commitment. The dinner at the Dubois family home was an elaborate affair. Crystal glasses clinked, silverware gleamed under the soft light of a chandelier. Marcus's parents, both impeccably dressed and radiating old-world charm, spoke with a refined French accent. The tension for me was immediate, a heavy weight in the elegant dining room. Marcus's mother, a formidable woman with sharp eyes, soon encouraged Sarah and Marcus to converse in French. "It's so lovely to hear the language spoken," she cooed, casting a warm smile at Sarah. I sat there, a polite, slightly awkward smile plastered on my face, nodding occasionally. They assumed I didn't understand. What they didn't know was that my grandmother, a quiet woman with a surprising past, had taught me French as a child. Not the formal academic kind, but the everyday conversational flow. I had absorbed it, almost subconsciously, a secret language tucked away in the back of my mind. As they spoke, my polite smile froze. Sarah, emboldened by the wine and the assumed privacy of a foreign tongue, became animated. She leaned closer to Marcus, her laughter tinkling. They exchanged intimate jokes, shared knowing glances. Then the conversation turned subtly to me. Marcus, with a charming shrug, made a veiled comment about my Midwestern earnestness. Sarah laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. "He's so naive," she said in French, her voice dropping a little, but still clear in the hushed room. "He thinks this little promotion is enough for me." My world, already precariously balanced, tilted. The words were a physical blow, a dagger to my heart, delivered with a casual cruelty that stole my breath. Marcus, his eyes twinkling, responded in French. "He'll never know what he's missing. Will he?" He raised his wine glass in a silent, mocking toast. My vision blurred slightly. I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white, digging the tines into my palm, a small private pain to anchor me. I forced myself to maintain a poker face, my smile fixed, even as everything I thought I knew about Sarah, about us, crumbled into dust around me. The clinking of glasses, the polite chatter, the scent of expensive food, it all became a surreal backdrop to the betrayal unfolding before my eyes. The infamous dinner finally ended. I maintained my facade, shaking hands, offering polite goodbyes in English, my mouth tasting like ash. My world had fractured into a million pieces right there at the Dubois family's polished mahogany table, and I had simply sat there, nodding, smiling, pretending not to notice. Inside, I was utterly shattered. The words, "He's so naive, he thinks this little promotion is enough for me," echoing with the relentless clang of a broken bell. Later that night, in the sterile quiet of our apartment, after Sarah had hummed her way through her bedtime routine, I confronted her. My voice was calm, too calm, like the surface of a frozen pond. "What were you and Marcus talking about in French tonight?" I asked, my eyes fixed on her. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, picking at a loose thread on her silk robe. She looked up, her expression a carefully constructed mask of innocence. "David, what are you talking about?" she said, her voice light, dismissive. "We were just talking about work, the translogics deal, some cultural differences. Nothing for you to worry about." She even managed a small, reassuring smile. Gaslighting, I realized with a fresh wave of nausea, was a precise art, and she was a master. My heart sank, plummeting through the floorboards. Her denial, so casual and absolute, confirmed everything. The painful reality of her deceit settled over me like a shroud. Despite the crushing weight of the betrayal, a desperate, hopeful part of me still wanted to salvage our future. It was a foolish, naive hope, but it pulsed stubbornly. I had the ring. I had the plan. Maybe I thought if I could just give her what she supposedly wanted, what she was supposedly waiting for, everything would snap back into place. The engagement ring, a tangible symbol of commitment, would somehow erase the doubt, silence the ugly French words, and bring back the old Sarah, the one who hated cilantro and laughed at my quiet jokes. The next evening I went through with it, the park bench, the river flowing by, the late summer light. I got down on one knee, the velvet box heavy in my hand. My voice, when I spoke, felt like it belonged to someone else, hollow and thin. "Sarah, will you marry me?" I asked, looking up at her, my eyes pleading for a glimpse of the person I thought I knew. She was clearly surprised. Her hand flew to her mouth and her eyes widened for a moment, a flash of genuine emotion. Then slowly a smile spread across her face. "Oh, David," she whispered, and for a split second I thought I saw the old Sarah. She paused, then, with a soft exhale, she said, "Yes, David, of course I will." But her initial joy, if that's what it was, quickly faded, replaced by a detached politeness, a practiced warmth that didn't reach her eyes. I felt no surge of triumph, no lightness, only a hollow emptiness in my chest. Her yes felt less like an affirmation of love and more like an obligation fulfilled, a box checked. Our engagement, instead of being a joyous union, felt forced, a silent acknowledgement of the growing chasm between us, papered over with a diamond ring. This was the path I chose, a path paved with my own desperate hope. It's a heavy thing, carrying a secret betrayal, living with the knowledge that the person you love has judged you, dismissed you, Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The gnawing suspicion, however, wouldn't let me rest. The image of Sarah and Marcus, their heads close, their whispered French, was a constant, unwelcome visitor in my thoughts. I started, subtly at first, to investigate Marcus Dubois. A few discreet searches, a couple of questions asked in hushed tones to colleagues in other departments. What I uncovered only deepened the rot. Marcus Dubois was more than just a charming client. He came from immense wealth, old European money tied to shipping and luxury goods. He had powerful connections, a social circle that spanned continents. And, more disturbingly, he had a well-known reputation. A womanizer, whispered discreetly by those who knew him. A man who collected beautiful things, including women, then moved on when he tired of them. My quiet investigation continued, each discovered detail a fresh drop of poison. Paranoia, a cold, sharp thing, settled into the corners of my mind. I found suspicious texts and calls on Sarah's phone, usually late at night, disguised under generic work contacts or their unfamiliar numbers. A quick search of a few of those numbers would often trace them back to an international prefix, then a local burner phone. Her stories became flimsier, her excuses for late nights away from home more vague. A networking event ran long, she'd say, or working on a big pitch with the team, couldn't leave. My stomach churned with a suffocating dread, knowing deep down what I was likely to confirm. One Tuesday evening, she announced she had a late work meeting, a crucial discussion about the Translogix contract. She kissed my cheek, grabbed her purse, and headed out. I waited 10 minutes watching her car disappear down the street. Then I grabbed my keys, the blood thrumming in my ears, and followed. My car, an older sedan, blended easily into the Bellevue traffic. The road she took was unfamiliar, leading out of the usual business district and towards the edge of town, where a few newer, more upscale hotels had sprung up. She pulled into the brightly lit parking lot of the Sterling, a place with valet parking and a discreet entrance, somewhere I'd never seen her frequent. I parked further down the street, beneath the shadow of a large oak tree, my engine off, heart pounding. I watched her walk into the lobby, her silhouette framed by the revolving glass doors. She looked elegant, purposeful, the kind of woman who belonged in such a place. Then I saw him. Marcus Dubois, standing by the check-in desk, looking relaxed, confident, his French charm radiating even from this distance. He smiled when he saw her, a wide, easy smile that made my gut clench. Sarah walked straight to him, no hesitation, no surprise, as if this meeting was the most natural thing in the world. They exchanged a brief, intimate touch on the arm, a gesture that spoke volumes. I watched, frozen as they spoke for a few moments, their heads close. Then he put a hand gently on her lower back, guiding her towards the elevators. They stepped in together, the doors sliding shut with a silent click. My worst fears, brutal and undeniable, were confirmed. The world around me dissolved into a painful cocktail of anger, grief, and disbelief. It was worse than anything I had imagined. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the sterile glow of the streetlights painting the interior of my car in cold hues. The engagement ring box, still tucked into the console, felt like a burning coal, incinerating every hope I'd had for our future. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The immediate impulse was a violent one. Burst into the hotel, expose them, scream, shatter their quiet infidelity into 1,000 pieces. And or drive home, wait for her, and unleash every ounce of my fury. But a cold, calculating part of my mind held me back. What good would that do? It would be messy, ugly, undignified. It would only give her more ammunition, another reason to dismiss me as naive, as not enough. I needed a clear head. I needed to process the true magnitude of this betrayal, to untangle the knotted mess of my emotions, and to plan my next move. Not out of rage, but out of a need for justice, for self-preservation. I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring around me, the silence in my car louder than any scream. The next morning, Sarah acted completely normal. She hummed while making coffee, asked about my day, debated what we should have for dinner. It was a chilling display either of profound obliviousness or masterful deception. I watched her, my coffee growing cold in my hands, a silent witness to her performance. The pain from the night before had solidified into a hard, cold knot in my chest. After breakfast, as she was getting ready for work, I confronted her. My voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the turmoil within me. "Where were you last night, Sarah?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe of our bedroom, watching her apply mascara. She paused, brushed halfway to her eye. "I told you, David," she said, her voice light. "A late work meeting. The Translogics deal is getting intense." She turned to me, a carefully constructed look of mild irritation on her face. "What is this, an interrogation?" "I followed you," I said, the words cutting through the air. "To the Sterling. I saw you meet Marcus in the lobby. I saw you go up to a room together." My gaze was unwavering, fixed on her. Her composure fractured, just for a second. Her hand trembled, smearing mascara slightly. Then she rallied, her voice hardening. "David, you're being paranoid. It was a business meeting, a private discussion about negotiations. You know how important that contract is. We had to be discreet." "What are you imagining?" She tried to gaslight me again, but her eyes, usually so controlled, flickered with a raw, undeniable fear. I didn't flinch. I just held her gaze, my silence a heavier accusation than any words could be. Finally, the carefully constructed facade crumbled. Her shoulders slumped, and a sob caught in her throat. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her perfect makeup running in streaks down her face. "It was a moment of weakness, David," she choked out, her voice broken. "It meant nothing, I swear. It was a mistake. Please, please forgive me. Let's just move past it." She reached for my hand, her fingers cold. "Please," she pleaded, looking up at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Let's just proceed with the wedding. We can bury this, David. It won't happen again. We can still have our future." She wanted to smooth it over, to pretend it hadn't happened, to push the ugliness back into the shadows. But I couldn't. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and realized the trust was shattered beyond any repair. The Sarah I had loved, the vibrant, fearless woman, was gone, replaced by this pleading, deceptive stranger. The profound pain that had consumed me began to transform, hardening into a cold, determined resolve. Her earlier contempt, her dismissal of my small-town ambition, her casual cruelty at the Dubois dinner, it all coalesced into a single, unshakable truth. She was a calculating opportunist, and I had been nothing more than a stepping stone, a convenient placeholder in her grand scheme for a life of wealth and status. Then a thought, cold and precise, slipped into my mind. Translogics, Sarah's company. They had a major contract renewal with Riverside Pharmaceuticals coming up, the very contract I was now overseeing as associate director. A contract that represented a significant portion of their annual revenue, a lifeline for their Bellevue operations. A dark idea began to form, a quiet, almost elegant way to make her pay. Not with violence, not with public humiliation, but with something far more devastating to someone like Sarah. A direct blow to her carefully constructed ambition, a quiet dismantling of her professional aspirations. With the cold resolve now set, I began to work. As the associate director, I had influence, access to information, and most importantly, the trust of my colleagues. My plan was not about outright sabotage, but about planting seeds, guiding the natural course of due diligence into a path that would be devastating for Sarah and Translogics. I started subtly. In internal meetings about the Translogics contract renewal, I would casually bring up a point of concern. "Remember that small compliance audit from 3 years ago?" I'd say, my voice thoughtful, not accusatory. "The one with the minor discrepancy in shipping logs for the European routes? Probably nothing, but with the new regulatory landscape, maybe we should just double-check that we're fully covered." It was a minor point, easily overlooked, but framed through my new position, it now sounded significant. A forgotten audit, a small variance that, under scrutiny, could balloon into something larger. I meticulously created a paper trail. Emails were drafted, not accusing but inquiring. Memos were circulated, seeking clarification on past practices. Every action was designed to appear professional, thorough, and untraceable back to a personal vendetta. I was merely doing my job, ensuring Riverside Pharmaceuticals was protected. My colleagues, trusting my judgment and the seriousness of my new title, began to scrutinize Translogix more closely. The wheels of corporate bureaucracy, once slow and predictable, now turned with a new grinding efficiency, fueled by the doubts I had so carefully instilled. The contract renewal process slowed dramatically. What should have been a rubber stamp became a full-blown investigation. Questions were raised, internal committees formed, and a formal review of Translogix's operational integrity was initiated. Each step was a quiet victory for me, a tightening of the noose. Sarah, completely unaware of my orchestrations, was blindsided. She called me, frantic, confused. "What's going on with Riverside?" she demanded over the phone one evening. "Suddenly, they're tearing apart our records, asking for things we haven't touched in years. It's making us look bad." She scrambled to defend Translogix, pulling late nights at her office, trying to placate increasingly frustrated executives at Riverside. But the seeds of doubt I had planted had taken root too deeply. Each minor discrepancy I'd highlighted, each forgotten audit I'd resurrected, now looked like a gaping hole in Translogix's compliance. The lucrative contract, a multi-year deal worth millions, was ultimately jeopardized. The impact on Sarah was immediate and severe. Her career, her standing within Translogix, began to crumble. Her father, a senior executive at Translogix, known for his pride and a fierce devotion to the family name, was furious. His reputation, and by extension the family's, was tarnished by the fallout. The whispers of incompetence, of a company unable to manage its own affairs, grew louder. And Marcus Dubois? As the scandal brewed, as Translogix's stock began to dip and the press caught wind of potential regulatory issues, he simply disappeared from her life. No more late-night texts, no more discreet meetings. He was a man who preferred success and luxury, not association with failing companies and potential scandal. Sarah was left alone, professionally exposed, socially isolated. The final blow came swiftly. Sarah was ultimately fired from Translogix. Her ambitious career, meticulously built, now lay in ruins. Her social standing, so carefully cultivated, was utterly destroyed. It was a quiet downfall, meticulously orchestrated, and for her, far more devastating than any public scene I could have made. I watched from a distance as Sarah's world crumbled. The news of her termination from Translogix spread quickly through Bellevue's intertwined corporate and social circles. Her carefully constructed network, once so robust, seemed to unravel. I felt a grim satisfaction, a cold triumph that settled deep in my bones. But beneath it, a strange, unexpected emptiness also took root. The victory I had orchestrated didn't bring the pure, cleansing satisfaction I had anticipated. It was hollow, tinged with a quiet regret for the person I had become, for the path I had taken. I met Sarah one last time, a few weeks after she was fired. We sat in a neutral coffee shop, the air thick with unspoken words. She looked tired, her usual sparkle diminished. Her ambition now a raw, exposed nerve. I slid the small velvet engagement ring box across the table. It seemed absurdly small, a relic from a different lifetime. "It's over, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet, firm. "There's nothing left." She tried to plead, her eyes welling up. "David, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. Please, we can fix this. I know I messed up, but I can change." Her voice was soft, desperate, a stark contrast to the dismissive tone I'd overheard at the Dubois dinner. But I was resolute. The image of her and Marcus, the casual cruelty of their French words, was burned into my memory. The pain of her gaslighting, her effortless deception, had carved out too deep a wound. "You chose your path, Sarah," I replied, my gaze steady, "and I chose mine." There was nothing more to say. She picked up the ring box, her fingers trembling, and walked out, leaving behind the ghost of a shared future. A profound sense of loss settled over me for the future we almost had, for the imagined life that would never be.